The lame man and the blind man. In the late afternoon, as the sun was setting, Srila Prabhupada liked to sit on the roof of his skyscraper, and his disciples would sit with him. Although the building was in Midtown, being situated on the west side afforded it a feeling of distance from the intensity of mid-Manhattan. Prabhupada would look out at the Manhattan skyline, and the breeze from the Hudson would ease the July heat. One evening, some of the devotees described to Srila Prabhupada some of the abominable activities going on in the city. They told him of prostitution and pornography, of acts of rampant criminal violence, and of the strange fetishes and fads of the flesh eaters, including the eating of human fetuses. This means, said Prabhupada, that we are actually preaching to animals. Of course, some of these activities are worse than animals. When the human being misuses their higher intelligence, they become worse than animals. One night on the roof, Rameshwar Swami asked Srila Prabhupada to reveal his plan for conquering the world with Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada was silent. Finally says, "No, because if I tell you my plans, then they may be spoiled." He had a plan, he said, but they were not ready for it. Srila Prabhupada ki. Interesting. We've said it before, but it's quite relevant. At one time, the devotees asked Srila Prabhupada, will Lord Chaitanya spread his movement through his devotees? Meaning Prabhupada's disciples. And Prabhupada said that Lord Chaitanya would spread his movement despite the devotees. Prabhupada had an expert way of keeping devotees humble, because even regardless we're so fallen and unqualified, still Lord Chaitanya's movement will spread despite all our faults. And we'll get the credit for it because we're helping out. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, entitled Krishna is the source of all incarnations, text number 22. You got that one, Magnus? Everybody brushed up on their Sanskrit lately? In the 18th, okay. Nara Devadvam Devadvam Apana Nara Devadvam Apana Sura Karya Chikirshaya Sura Karya Chikirshaya Samudra Nigrahadini Samudra Nigrahadini Chakre Viryani Ata Param Shishikontana Shashiki Chakre Viryanyata Param Naradevadvam Apana Naradevadvam Apana Surakarya Chikirshaya Surakarya Chikirshaya Samudra Nigrahadini Samudra Nigrahadini Chakri Viryanyata Param Chakri Viryanyata Param Naradevadvam Apana Naradevadvam Apana Surakarya Chikirshaya Surakarya Chikirshaya Samudra Nigrahadini Samudra Nigrahadini Chakriviryanyata param. Chakriviryanyata param. Naradevatvam apana. Surakarya chikirshaya. Samudranigrahadini. Chakriviryanyata param. Please chant.
Naradevatmamapana Suryakarya Chikeshaya Samudra Nigrahadani Chakre Viryanyataparam Naradevatmamapana Suryakarya Chikeshaya Samudra Nigrahadini Chakre Viryanyataparam
Yeah. Nara, human being. Devatvam, divinity. Apana, having assumed the form of. Sura, the demigods. Karya, activities. Chikirshaya, for the purpose of performing. Samudra, the Indian Ocean. Nigraha Adini, controlling, etc. Chakre, did perform. Viryani, superhuman prowess. Ataparam, thereafter. Translation. In the 18th incarnation, the Lord appeared as King Ram in order to perform some pleasing work for the demigods. He exhibited superhuman powers by controlling the Indian Ocean and then killing the atheist King Ravan, who was on the other side of the sea. Please repeat. In the 18th incarnation, the Lord appeared as King Ram. In order to perform some pleasing work for the demigods, he exhibited superhuman powers by controlling the Indian Ocean and then killing the atheist King Ravan, who was on the other side of the sea. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The personality of Godhead, Sri Ram, assumed the form of a human being and appeared on the earth for the purpose of doing some pleasing work for the demigods or the administrative personalities to maintain the order of the universe. Sometimes great demons and atheists like Ravan and Hiranyakashipu and many others become very famous due to advancing material civilization by the help of material science and other activities with the spirit of challenging the established order of the Lord. For example, the attempt to fly to other planets by material means is a challenge to the established order. The conditions of each and every planet are different, and different classes of human being are accommodated there for particular purposes mentioned in the codes of the Lord. But, puffed up by tiny success in material advancement, sometimes the godless materialists challenge the existence of God. Ravan was one of them, and he wanted to deport ordinary men to the planet of Indra, heaven, by material means without consideration of the necessary qualifications. He wanted a staircase to be built up directly reaching the heavenly planet so that people might not be required to undergo the routine of pious work necessary to enter that planet. He also wanted to perform other acts against the established rule of the Lord. He even challenged the authority of Sri Ram, the personality of Godhead, and kidnapped his wife, Sita. Of course, Lord Ram came to chastise this atheist, answering the prayer and desire of the demigods. He therefore took up the challenge of Ravan, and the complete activity is the subject matter of the Ramayana. Because Lord Ramachandra was the personality of Godhead, he exhibited superhuman activities which no human being, including the materially advanced Ravan, could perform. Lord Ramachandra prepared a royal road on the Indian Ocean with stones that floated on the water. The modern scientists have done research in the area of weightlessness, but it is not possible to bring in weightlessness anywhere and everywhere. But because weightlessness is the creation of the Lord, by which he can make the gigantic planets fly and float in the air, he made the stones even within this earth to be weightless, and prepared a stone bridge on the sea without any supporting pillar. That is the display of the power of God. Om Ganatmarandasya Gananjana Slakaya Chakshunmalitamina Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Tam Garoti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Grimya Kripatamam Vande Shri Indinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. In the 18th incarnation, the Lord appeared as King Ram in order to perform some pleasing work for the demigods. He exhibited superhuman powers by controlling the Indian Ocean and then killing the atheist King Ravan, who was on the other side of the sea. It's interesting, this word divine sounds quite similar to Deva. So the Lord's activities they're not to be considered ordinary activities. So they have this, in India they have this conception that they'd like everything, those who are quite staunch followers of the Hindu tradition, they have this desire that things go back to Ram Raj. Ram Raj means the time when Ram was ruling and everything was being perfect. And so Ram is considered the perfect king. In Bhagavad Gita, what does it say about Lord Ram? That's right, yeah. Of wielders of weapons, I am Ram. So sometimes when people are great leaders, they become enamoured by their power. But the Lord is not enamoured by his power because he eternally has that power. He's never puffed up by it, and Prabhupada makes this point that the scientists or materialists even, whether they're scientists or otherwise, they make a little advancement and are very puffed up by it, a little material advancement, and then they think they're the doer of activities. But the only real doer is Krishna, and Krishna is never puffed up. This is the difference between the Supreme Being and us tiny little puffed up rascals. Is that we give us a little bit of power, as this saying was, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But that's absolutely wrong when it comes to Krishna, because Krishna is perfect and complete. He doesn't require anything from anyone, but out of his mercy, he appears to protect the devotees. So the demigods were troubled by Ravan, and we see that he wanted to build a staircase to heaven. I think someone wrote a song similar to that. I don't need any renditions of it, thanks. So some people may want to do like that. They want to bypass the, what's it probably said? They don't want to undergo the routine of pious work necessary to enter that planet. So So in order to go to these planets, you have to have a particular type of body to exist in that atmosphere. So just like now, people plan to go to the moon, Mars, wherever else they want to go. Then they might physically get to go to these places, but they won't have the necessary body to exist in these places. And therefore it's out of their purview. They cannot force their way into that environment because they don't have the body for it. Just like if you need to sleep all the time, you get the body of a bear. But if we human form of life, we can't sleep all the time. Or if we want to live in water, you need the body of a fish. You can't just decide, I fancy being a fish, let me just go there. You're going to have oxygen tanks and you're going to run out of oxygen. So similarly, we might want to go to some other planet, but we don't have the suitable body for it. We don't even have the suitable body for different situations in this planet. It's like a lizard could live in the desert for some time. They can do without water for a long period of time. So different species, the Lord has endowed them with particular qualities, and many, even on this planet, many animals have powers which we don't even have. So it's puffed up just to think that we are the supreme controller and just push God out of the way. So this is what Ravan was trying to do. We don't need God, and I'll do my own program. We'll build a staircase to the heavenly planets, and we can enjoy without having to undergo all this nonsense, austerity business. We'll just get up there, and if the demigods get in the way, then we'll chop them, we'll give them a fight. Ravan is very, very powerful because he performed great austerities. In order to get these austerities, these powers, he had to perform great tapasya or penances. But the thing is, with demons, they forget where the power is coming from. Once they get some benediction, just like this, there was one demon was given a blessing by Lord Shiva that whoever's head he would touch, his head would blow into 1,000 pieces. So immediately he wanted to test it because he'd been doing some austerities, and Lord Shiva was kind of duty bound to give this benediction because that's the deal. It's just like you go to the shop, you give the money, they got to give the thing. If you order something online and they don't send it, then they're not keeping their part of the deal. So when they do these material austerities, then they're just like ordering online, like on the sort of karmic online platform. So the demigods have to supply. They can't refuse. So Lord Shiva gave him the benediction, and as soon as he got the benediction, what did he do? He wanted to try it out on Lord Shiva. He wanted to touch his head. And Lord Shiva had to run away from him. And so this chase was going on all over the universe, and finally Lord Shiva arrived at Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu, being all pervasive, he knew what was going on, and he pacified the demon. He says, my dear friend, you don't think Lord Shiva can give such a benediction. He just associates with the ghosts and hobgoblins, and he's covered in ashes. He's in a mode of ignorance, How can he give such a benediction? And so Lord Vishnu very much convinced him. He says, just touch your head and you'll see. He's got no power. So he touched his head, and then, of course, his head exploded. So in this way, Lord Vishnu protected Lord Shiva and annihilated the demon. So the Lord is supremely intelligent, and the Lord is never frustrated in his attempts, not his attempts, but his endeavours. Whenever he does something, then so many things are achieved. Simply in this verse, Printaraya sadhuram vinashaya chaduskritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge. In order to Printaraya sadhuram, deliver the pious or the devotees, and vinashaya chaduskritam, to destroy the duskritinas or the miscreants, the demons, as well as dharma samstapanataya, to establish principles of dharma, sambhavami yuge. I invent myself millennium after millennium. So the Lord does this. These are only some of the things which he achieves by coming to this earthly plane, and so many other things go on at the same time. His pastimes are exhibited. Many people are attracted to devotional service. Many people are liberated. and the Lord comes with his devotees, so they get a chance to perform pastimes in the material world. So there's many wonderful pastimes going on when the Lord appears, such as this pastime of building the bridge from India to Sri Lanka. At that time it was just called Lanka, and then sometime later they called it Ceylon, and then they call it Sri Lanka again. And so these books are thousands of years old, and they're talking about this bridge, and in fact the Ramayana is even further, gone further back than the Bhagavatam by a long period of time, by millennia. And it's talking about this bridge getting built to Lanka of stones. And it's been actually noticed that this structure can be seen by satellite. They call it Adam's Bridge. Because it's so old, they don't know how it got there, but it's understood to be man-made structure. It's not that could have just occurred naturally. So they call it man-made, of course, but this is the Supreme Lord's ability. You know, he's known as Yogeshwara, which means the Supreme Master of all mystic powers. He doesn't have to perform austerities. When Krishna was a young boy, how old was he when he lifted Govardhan? Was he 7? 5? 7? I think 7, isn't it? So he was 7 years old. It's not that he had to go to the Himalayas and lock himself in a cave and perform great austerities and follow a program of self-denial, etc. for a long, long time and then come back and do such a thing. And even if he were a yogi, going there for a long time to do that, then it's not common for even such yogis to be able to do such a thing. But he was simply a young boy, small boy, and generally most people are considered to be right-handed. No offence against anyone who's left-handed, but the pastime of Krishna lifting Govardhan Hill is that he lifted it with his left hand and the pinky. So this is considered, if you're left-handed, then your right pinky would probably be your weakest point of your body. So he's just showing that even by the apparent weakest part of him, he can lift a mountain without any hesitation. So this is God, not someone who can do some little magical tricks. So sometimes you get some what we call bogey yogis, or yogis who are more interested in sensual enjoyment rather than actual devotional service. And they can learn some little mystic feat. They get some benediction where they can display some little mystic powers, like produce some apples or honey or ashes. But as Tamal Krishna Maharaj rightly pointed out, or little gold, they cannot produce enough apples to feed the starving multitudes. They cannot produce enough gold that you would find in a gold mine. And we find more ashes in a crematorium than they can provide. So, as in the words of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, cheap God. God is not so cheap. God is not so cheap that by performing austerities for a couple of dozen years, we can do a little lagima siddhi, means floating or levitating, or prapti siddhi, where we obtain something, we take something which is already there, it's existing on the material platform, it's transferred into the subtle platform and transported, and then we manifest again on the gross platform. This is prapti siddhi. So a pure devotee actually has all these siddhis or perfections at his disposal, but he doesn't use them because it has a tendency to attract a cheap following. The people just want to see some magic, they want entertainment. Oh, that was great, do another one. And now, of course, that doesn't mean to say that there are not genuine people who have used mystic powers to heal people or to do something to attract people and give them some faith. But generally, like we see with Srila Prabhupada, there was the example One reporter asked Prabhupada that this Swami can do this miracle and this yogi can do this mystic feat, etc. And he quoted a few people in a few instances and he says, what's your miracle? And he pointed to all his disciples and he says, these are my miracles. Previously they were eating meat, illicit sex, intoxication, gambling. Now they don't do any of this. This is my miracle. So this is the real thing. This is the important thing. And as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yoginam apisarvesham madgate nantaratmana shradavan bhajate yumam sami yuktatamo mataha. And of all yogis, the one who is most intimately united with me in yoga, through Bhakti Yoga, is the highest of all. So undoubtedly the different yogic processes are there for elevation, and it culminates in Bhakti Yoga. Now we're not just saying that because we think, well, what we do is the best and everything else is, we're not like those guys over there, we're the better ones. It's not like that. Krishna's saying it. So we don't necessarily have to go to the forest and perform some great austerities. Our austerity is simply taking prasadam, chanting Hare Krishna, and sharing Krishna consciousness with others, and that's enough to satisfy Krishna. And learning about Krishna, Bolo Krishna, Bhajo Krishna, Koro Krishna, Sika. Bolo Krishna, chant the holy name. Koro Krishna, learn about Krishna, Bhajo Krishna, Sika, and learn about Krishna from these transcendental books which give instructions on how to remember Krishna and how to serve Krishna. So Lord Ram, as Raghunath was pointing out in Bhagavad Gita, it says, "O wielders of weapons, I am Ram." Now there's another incarnation who's famous for wielding a weapon. Anybody know? Parashuram, top of the class. Yeah, Parashuram, now, he came for a particular purpose. Does anyone remember what that purpose was? Javat?
To rid the world of the unregulated kshatriyas.
Of the what kshatriyas?
Of the unruly kshatriyas.
To rid the world of the unruly kshatriyas. There was an overburden of kshatriyas. So Prabhupada says typically when people make a weapon, they want to use it. Just like the atom bomb, he says, they've made it, so they want to use it. But it's also a deterrent because they know the devastation of it is so much that everybody loses. It's a total lose-lose situation. But typically, when they make these weapons, then they want to they make them for the purpose for using them. So when armies were getting so big, then they're simply invading each other and trying to conquer over each other, and it's becoming such a burden on the earth. When the humans are just going to war all the time, annihilating each other, it becomes such a burden on the earthly planet. Parashuram, he came and annihilated the Kshatriyas. And then when he heard that Lord Ram had came and he was such a powerful Kshatriya, then he was thinking, well, here we go again, let me annihilate this powerful Kshatriya, because he's just going to cause more problems in the world, building a big army and disturbing the peace again. So he met Lord Ram, and then there was some, remind me if anyone, correct me if I'm wrong, there was some fight between them, is that right? Yeah. And of course, Parashuram could not conquer over Lord Ram. And you might think, well, this is Krishna fighting Krishna, but this is the beauty and the wonder of Achintya Beda Beda Tattva, that the Lord can incarnate in one form and another form and even fight with himself. So this is inconceivable. Achintya Beda Beda Tattva means it's inconceivably, simultaneously one and different. So of course we think, oh, it's inconceivable. How can I conceive of that? So the best way to conceive of it is become a pure devotee, and then we can conceive of it firsthand by meeting the Lord, as opposed to just trying to fit in a little box in our mind. The Lord is not restricted by our limited mental capacity, but he reveals himself to the devotee. When one performs devotional service, then one gets closer to the Lord and their understanding deepens more and more. So when Parashuram realised he wasn't dealing with an ordinary Kshatriya, then he realised, okay, my job is done here now. I don't have to be looking out for this Lord Ram is here. So Lord Ram is the ideal king, and what is that? It says in the Bhagavad Gita about the monarch. Same chapter. Is that right? Among rulers, I'm the monarch. I think that sounds right. I've only read it hundreds of times. So we can see actually that recently the Queen suffered the loss of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, and although he was a great age, 99, then he obviously knew he wasn't going to live forever. He made preparations for his own funeral, etc. And we see there's a great lot of sympathy comes towards the Queen, and in the world, she'd been ruling for like 60 odd years. Don't know how long it is. Now, whether we think the Queen is qualified or unqualified, we see that the many people actually have got a lot of affection for the Queen, and it's natural that people look up. They want to have somebody who will be setting an example. They want to have someone who's going to be leading the way, qualified leaders. They don't want chaos. Prabhupada called democracy demon crazy, that some demons get together, they have some ideas, and there's no reference to Shastra or anything like that. Of course, democracy also can have its place if the motivation is not impure. But whether it's democracy, communism, thisism, thatism, then if the underlying motive is not pure, then it will never succeed. So, with the monarch of King Ram, then he was setting such a great example that everybody loved him. And when he was exiled by some trickery, he was exiled in the kingdom of Ayodhya. Said, okay, well that's fine. they protested it. They said, oh, you can't exile, Lord Ram. He's about to be crowned. He wasn't the king at the time; he was prince. And then, because the story is that his father, Maharaj Dasarath, was in battle, and if I remember rightly, he lost consciousness, and his wife Kaikeyi came and rescued him and drove the chariot off of the battlefield. And when he came to, he gave her a benediction. He says, "You can have any benediction you want, ask of it." And she said, "I'll ask for it when I want it. I don't want anything from you. It's my duty to serve you and save you like this." So she had no intention of asking for any such benediction to be fulfilled, but as the story goes, one evil hunchback maid, she had to have a hunch, didn't she, just for the story, then she convinced Kaikeyi. She twisted her mind and made her go and ask for this promise, this benediction. And she said, "I want that my son Bharat will be installed and that Ram should be banished for 14 years. It was 14 years, wasn't it? She called me time after Shashiki. So Maharaj Dasarath, he didn't want to do this, but he had to. He had to keep his word. This is the thing, is he could have said, forget it. But the thing with the Kshatriyas, their word is their honour. Without their honour, then they was it that death before dishonour? They would rather die than give up their word. This is the true quality of a Kshatriya, proper Kshatriya, not just that they learn some kung fu and then or learn how to fire a rifle or something like that, that they have very heroic qualities and qualities of high moral standing and qualities of setting a good example. They're very austere, very regulated. So he gave in to it, and but when Bharat heard this, he says, "I don't want to be king." He says, "So therefore I'm going to go with Ram to the forest in exile." In fact, everybody in the whole kingdom of Ayodhya says, "Well, that's fine. If you're going to banish Lord Ram, then we're all going with him." So the whole kingdom was going to go with him. This is how much they loved Lord Ram. It's not like, great, we're getting rid of him, let's get somebody else in. He never had any competitors. So of course this is the Lord's Leela, this is the Lord's pastime. And as the story goes, then the whole kingdom was following Lord Ram, and he said, okay, stop, we're going into the forest now, and I want you to stay here, and I want you to serve under Bharat until I come back. So Bharat, he actually, I think he just lived just outside the town in a very humble abode, and he used to worship Lord Ram's shoes every day. He never considered himself as being the ruler, he just considered himself as taking Lord Ram's place until he returned. And it was Lakshman and Sita who went with Ram. And of course later on they met with Hanuman, and there's many wonderful pastimes and adventures that they had there, not the least being the kidnapping and rescue of Sita Devi. So today is the appearance of Lord Ram, and the way that if we want to have qualified leaders, then if the citizens themselves expect the leaders to be qualified in Kali Yuga, especially like governmental or national, international leaders, then the best way to do that is that they become devotees themselves, because we see that the leaders, they will make laws according to vox populi. What was legal some time ago, or what was allowed some time ago, is not allowed now, and what was illegal previously is now legal. So according to the supply and demand, this is the kind of capitalistic and democratic way to do things, according to, okay, what's going to get the most votes, okay, get my hairstyle like this, say these words, whatever else is going on behind the scenes. And in general, people have found it very difficult to trust any kind of politician. And for those who have got good intentions, then it's even difficult for them to manifest the good intentions, because it's not as simple as it seems. But if the people in general elevate their consciousness and they make demands that, we don't want this, we're not happy with this, then the leaders will have to respond. And we're seeing things like that happening, just like this, considering the ecology of the planet. Now, whether you believe in global warming or whether you don't, because there's two sides to that, but regardless of that, still it is getting closer to the Isavasam Idam Sarvam principle, which is to respect the creation which is there, and to work in such a way that it's sustainable and isn't simply just raping the earth of all its resources hedonistically. And the rise, or what we say, perhaps the decline in meat eating, this is also another good sign that the government's then having to legislate things to show, oh yeah, this product is suitable for vegetarians. Almost 40 years ago, when I became vegetarian, it was very difficult to find products which are vegetarian unless it was vegetables or fruit. And they started putting ingredients, but then we used to have this additive Bible called E for additive, and we used to have loads of E numbers, so you'd look up, okay, that E number is of animal origin, we can't have that. But nowadays, and particularly the UK is being one of the leaders in the world regarding vegetarianism for a long time. So these are ways by which we can improve the leadership, and of course herself being a good example. So Lord Ram, those who have read the Ramayana, particularly in India, practically everybody's read or heard the Ramayana many, many times. Kusum Sarovar at Govardhan, then Pitaji, the old Pujari who used to live there, we had a very nice relationship with him. And he used to read the Ramayana. He'd just read it from cover to cover. As soon as he's finished, he'd read it again, and he read it innumerable times. And he was such a sweet devotee, very pure. You could tell that when he was chanting, then he was very peaceful. He was getting something out of the chanting. It wasn't like us where we've got to like shake around all the time to stay awake, or walk up and down, or grit our teeth, or we're not even listening to the mantra. I remember one time I was chanting at Krishna's Grove over there, and I was struggling staying awake, and I was going, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. He just said, Shanti, Shanti. I realised, you can't force Krishna to manifest just because you're trying to grab it. We're chanting it nicely with devotion, we're chanting to please the Lord. So everything's coming from the chanting, understanding the pastimes of the Lord, appreciating the Lord's mercy, appreciating the Lord in the form of the devotees. It's all coming from the chanting, appreciating the Lord's prasadam, appreciating the Lord's devotees, other services of devotees, the service that we have ourselves. If we don't have appreciation for the service we have, we'll never be satisfied. We can make so many material adjustments, but we'll never be satisfied. We should be grateful that we have some service, and when we are, then that itself will satisfy us. We'll not want anything higher than that. I mean, there is nothing higher, but we want anything other than that. And service begins with Shravanam, Kirtanam, hearing and chanting. And if we're in a position where we can't be at the temple full time doing service, or we're too far away from a temple, then hearing and chanting, reading, offering our food, this is devotional service. Make our home into a temple and live the life of a devotee in our own circumstances. So it's not that when Lord Ram was on the planet and everybody was happy with him, everybody lived in ashram. Everybody was living normal lives. They had the 4 varnas and ashrams, but they were living perfect life as a devotee. And until only a couple of decades ago, the last Hindu kingdom, which was Nepal, everybody loved the king. Wherever you went in Nepal, there was pictures of the king in the shops and places, and they were very much loved their king. And it was against the law to kill the cow in Nepal. If you killed a cow, you get 30 years for it. Same as killing a human being. Actually, there's a quote in the Bible, is it Isaiah 55? To kill an ox is as to kill a man. So this is how they looked at it. I'm not sure how things are now. But this is, the pious leader takes charge of all the living entities, not just the human beings. Just because the cats and the dogs and the cows don't vote doesn't mean to say they don't have a say. They don't want to be abused. And Lord Ram, he showed this, that every living entity is dear to him as another. When they were building the bridge to Lanka, then some of the great heroes like Hanuman and Lakshman, they were throwing big rocks and mountains and boulders in there. And this little, was it a spider, was chucking some grains of sand in. And I think it was Lakshman who was laughing. He was saying, look at this. And Ram says, no, I accept his service as much as I accept your service. He's acting according to his capacity. So this is the Lord's consciousness. He's the well-wisher of every single living entity. And therefore we don't have the right to interfere with the Lord's well-wishing for the living entities. We should also align ourselves with the Lord's mood in that regard. We are not the well-wisher, but we understand. We're not the well-wishers and we're not the benefactor. But Srila Prabhupada used to sign his letters, "You're ever well-wisher." And this is something also we can apply. Jesus said, love thy enemies. What was it said about that again? Some quote about loving enemies.
Love enemies as yourself.
Is that it? I think it was a different one. Love thy neighbour as thyself. Your neighbour might be your enemy though. Quite often people can't tolerate each other, so become enemies. Yes. Anyway, if we have an enemy, or someone's making us an enemy, or someone is causing us some problem, then we can love them by praying for them. Pray to the Lord that they actually can get benefited and be out of their condition. Pray that we can also be compassionate to them. That will help them. So, of course, Ravan was frustrated in his attempts to reach the heavenly planets by material methods. And this is why the demigods approached him, because they were afraid that Ravan was so powerful that they couldn't actually contend his power. They realised this is a job for Lord Vishnu. Just like in the comics, they say this is a job for Superman. When the law enforcement realises it's beyond them because some evil villain comes on the scene, then they would look out for Superman or some other hero. But it's funny that because people can accept what do you call these? Superheroes, yeah. And they'll spend millions of dollars making movies about these and books and comics and all that. But when you talk about the real superhero who's Krishna, then it's just a fairy tale, it's just imagination, they don't want to know. But if they really wanted to make some amazing movies, they should read Krishna book. Imagine they made some nice movies about the Ramayana. There were some devotees tried to get some attention in Hollywood to make that. As a devotee called, what was his name again?
Chatuhasya.
Yeah, whatever it was. Yeah, Chatuhasya. Yeah. He was an artist, and he was also into filmmaking, and he'd written some scripts for the Ramayana. But he didn't get any takers. So of course, this may be the Lord's desire, because perhaps he'd like it presented properly, and devotee may not. This may have been the problem, that people sometimes. It's interesting though, because although sometimes people don't like to promote religions, there are so many kind of biblical movies and things like the parting of the Red Sea and stuff like that, historical biblical movies. In India, there's many Hindi versions of Ramayana, Sita's wedding, so many things like that. Neelchal Mahaprabhu and the Maya of Nadia, Krishna pastimes. But it's interesting because it shows you that people inherently and intrinsically, they want to turn to a superpower in times of need. And like they say, there's no atheists in the foxholes, there's no atheists in the trenches. When as a young man, when I was working, there was one old guy told me that when he was in the war, Second World War, then he said all the big tough guys who didn't believe in God, I don't need that, before they were going on the front line, they would all be praying. They'd all be down on their knees praying. So this is a situation that typically in times of distress, this is one of the 4 types of persons who approaches the Lord. And the demigods were doing this. They were in distress, the threat of the demons entering into the heavenly planets and upsetting everything and upsetting the order of things. Then they realised only Vishnu can take care of this. So typically when we try our best and we realise I can't do this without Krishna's help. So this is us. We should act as if it depends on us, but know that it depends on Krishna. Nothing happens without Krishna's consent. So if we can align ourselves with Krishna's will, then that's the sure way of bringing Krishna's blessings upon us. So later on today, this afternoon, we're going to have some more discussions about Lord Ram and some bhajans, and a feast day later on. It's fasting till moonrise. For those who can't fast, then they should take some water or fruit or something, take something light. So it's good to make a fast, because then we align ourselves with more benedictions from the Lord on these special days. Then we get special mercy. So also just a little bit that on this day, 25 years ago, Sri Kodnitai Shashi made their appearance in Krunabhavan. And when the Lord does something, it doesn't happen by chance. It's not just whimsical. So any of the young devotees know how Krunabhavan is named Krunabhavan? Felix, John, Kat, Laura? Anybody? How is Krunabhavan named Krunabhavan? I think Felix wants to try.
Is it the first Shalakar Shila that was called Korean
That's right. So when Prabhupada was in South India, one of the chief priests from the Sri Sampradaya gave Srila Prabhupada a gift of a Shalagram Shila, Sri Krishna Sindhu, about that size. And Srila Prabhupada gave that Shila. So the first Shalagram who came into ISKCON was giving to Pradyumna, his servant at that time, and then that Shalagram went to Jayatirtha, and then it went to Balabhadra, who brought him here. And Krunabhavan was named Krunabhavan, the home of Krishna Sindhu. That's what it's all about, actually. Although we say abode of mercy, then Lord Rama is known also as Krishna Sindhu, ocean of mercy, ocean of compassion. As is Lord Chaitanya, he's known as Kripa Sindhu, or Karuna Sindhu, ocean of mercy. So for many years, actually, our main deity was Lord Ram. And we were chanting, we had this Gauranga campaign, we were getting everybody on the street to chant Gauranga, not just chant it, but actually shout it very loudly, to the point where sometimes you'd be standing on the street and like 100 yards or so away, somebody would see you and they'd shout, Gauranga. So even if you're on a mental platform, people on the street would get you off the mental platform because they'd say, Gauranga, be happy, you don't look very happy, come on, shout Gauranga. Sometimes the devotees would be getting preached to by the non-devotees. Of course, everyone was becoming a devotee, and even people were using this as a greeting. I overheard a couple of people saying Gauranga to each other. I was in Paisley, and I thought, oh, Gauranga. I heard, just behind me I had Gauranga, and I turned round and I thought they were speaking to us, and they were talking to each other, and it was nothing to do with myself. People using it as a greeting, and of course the devotees were risking life and limb, hanging over motorway bridges, putting up posters. I don't know any of them in case anyone decides to start any legal proceedings. It was nothing to do with Krunabhavan. And we had buses with Gauranga on the outside and on the inside, and in the tubeway in Glasgow also we had posters on the inside. So there's a lot of chanting was going on in Scotland, north of England, and it was starting to spread beyond that too. One devotee, Anuruddha, went to Germany and put stickers all over the place there. Other devotees were taking it other places. And this is actually what Srila Prabhupada said when he arrived in Boston Harbour in 1965. He said that the holy name of Lord Gauranga would be spread to every town and village. And this is also what Lord Nityananda said, that Bhaja Gauranga Kaha Gauranga Laha Gauranga Namare Jai Jana Gauranga Bhaja Se Amara Pranare. So the whole Gauranga campaign was to invoke the blessings of Lord Nityananda, who is the most merciful. Some consider even more merciful than Lord Chaitanya because he's giving Lord Chaitanya. So we noticed actually when this Gauranga campaign was going on that the more established churches who we used to get a lot of opposition and problems from, that abated, and other difficulties we experienced at the time with trying to be on the street distributing books and problems with the law in that regard, then that also, it seemed to be the oil in the engine. If you try to run an engine with no oil in it, you get friction and trouble comes. You put oil in it, everything runs nice and fine. So when Lord Chaitanya's name was there, then the whole atmosphere was changing. So the chanting was going on for some time, and Lord Chaitanya appeared on Ram Navami. We just come back from from Sankirtan, and there was a call there. We should go and pick him up from the airport. So we'll speak more about that later. So it's no coincidence that our presiding deity was Lord Ram, and then Lord Chaitanya, who is none other than Lord Ram, who is none other than Lord Krishna, appeared on Ram Navami to show that there's no difference, one and the same person. And he arrives when he wants to come. We weren't expecting, there was some arrangement that it was supposed to be coming in some period of time, but then without any notice we just discovered that he'd arrived. So he makes his own plans. Okay, anyone got any questions or comments? Talks to you.
Yeah, I don't know exactly the point you were making. You were making some point about God being, that they can have like cheap gods, Krishna, and so that's a cheap god. And I was thinking, even in there's other schools of philosophy affiliated with particular churches where they portray God as very weak. That if you don't have all the limbs and it has to be in the coffin, then God will be able to make you up. That's why we're going to have transfusions of blood also. I was thinking, there's Lord Ramachandra, all the monkey warriors were killed and ripped apart, and half of them were eaten by the Rakshasas, and Lord Ramachandra just brings them all back up, so that he's not running around trying to find the leg to put them in the box. So much easier to believe in God when he's portrayed as he is, all powerful, and some kind of lame, half-baked idea of God being like incapable of doing this or incapable of doing that.
Yeah, because that would suggest that, as what Hosh is saying, is that portrayal of God has been someone who can't actually give liberation because some limitation of not all the body was in the coffin, or some kind of restriction with the burial or something like that. That would indicate that there's some power greater than God, that he's not free to actually just liberate whoever he wants. So Prabhupada made a nice statement in that regard, that if we dedicate our life to the service of Lord Chaitanya, then even if we have difficulty remembering him at the time of death, he won't forget us. So that's a safer bet than just thinking, let me just be a bit of a rascal and do a few pious things, and hopefully I'll get the scales tipped in the right favour. It's quite a big gamble, really. Do it like that, or thinking that, well, I'll just be a bit of a rascal, and at the time of death I'll just chant Hare Krishna, I'll just get a quick mantra in there. So it's a much safer bet just to be a devotee now, give our life to Krishna, and for some reason, because sometimes people, when they leave their body, they don't get any notice. They're just immediately evicted from the body. They're at one moment's inattention, you get run over by a bus or something. I've seen it in Newcastle once. I was down advertising a festival, and this young student, assuming he's a student because we were distributing flyers at university, and he just came out of there, and he just, there was railings stop between the main road, it was a busy junction, and the pavement, but he just didn't want to go down to the pedestrian crossing. He just hopped over the railings. As soon as he landed on the road, he got hit by a bus. And he may have survived, but it didn't look too good. It didn't look good at all. It was quite shocking. And he didn't have time to think. So that's all it takes. Now, I'm not trying to scaremonger, but I'm just saying the point is better to not gamble with this valuable human form of life. It's so valuable that it affords us to get out of this material world once and for all. So the more we remember Krishna throughout this life, then the more that either we'll remember him at the time of death, or he'll be there. If we have some difficulty remembering, he'll be there because he remembers us. And if we attract Krishna's mercy, then there's no power on heaven or earth that can't stop the Lord from giving his mercy.
That reminds me of just before I joined, I visited Children's College, and my plan was, I told her that would be who was a Prabhupada at the time, who was about to, I was going to join in 2 weeks, and he goes, great, okay, we'll see you 2 weeks back to tell me. And 2 weeks went by, and it changed my plans. I think it was
That's a good point, yeah, we shouldn't take it cheaply. Krishna is not a sense object. We're used to dealing with things and people as sense objects, accepting and rejecting on the basis of how pleasing it is to our senses. But if we know that we've got Krishna's mercy, count our blessings, then we certainly don't want to do anything which loses that. And we should do everything to maintain that. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
This whole space program thing that's going on now is a bit of a space race going on between some.
Spaceship program.
Yeah, if it wasn't, I might be a good competitor. Yeah, I mean, to me it seems more in line with Ravana's program, but a lot of these space programs people are glorifying now, so I don't know what the Krishna conscious take on those projects would be.
Yeah, a lot of people may glorify it, but like Prabhupada said, why are they spending billions of dollars to send people to bring back some dust when there's people starving on this planet?
Yeah.
Why not solve the planet? Charity begins at home.
Yeah.
Why not fix this first? What we're going to do is go and inhabit another planet and just mess that one up as well.
Yeah.
Because we actually don't know what should be done and what should not be done. We don't even know the value of human form of life, what the purpose of human form of life, but we want to go and conquer space. Like some kind of just a big adventure, because there's nothing left to discover on planet Earth, so let's go somewhere else. Just wanderlust.
Yeah.
That's all. It's a bit more of the value.
Also, the seem to Prana, you say that all the materialists are doing is eating, mating, sleeping and defending. He says, but look, they're going to the moon. And then Prabhupada said, yeah, but what are they doing on the moon? They're just sleeping and eating.
Yeah, they haven't going on to the animal propensities. On one hand, they want to go to the moon, on the other hand, they're about ready to blow up each other here on the planet. And they're wondering if we're going to annihilate each other here. I think they've been watching too many science fiction movies. It's interesting because some of these people, the things they believe in, they ridicule us for our beliefs, but the things they believe in, it's just like what is night for the introspective sage is daytime for the non-devotee, and vice versa. So of course, and this was there actually back in the late 60s when they were having this space race as well. Of course that's another subject which is a whole different discussion. But the thing is, even people then were thinking, what's the point of spending so much money going there when we've got problems here we need to sort? So all they're going to do is it's called polished animalism. Eat, sleep, mate and defend, but in a more polished way. But still the same activity. The animal product says defends with its claws or its jaws, its teeth, or whatever other means, and we defend with some other weapon. Previously used to be bows and arrows, and now it's very powerful guns and bombs. But it's still the same thing, so what's the advancement? The mentality is not advanced any. Okay, we should close there, and we'll be back at the temple at 5 o'clock to celebrate the appearance of Sri Ramachandra and the appearance of Sri Shashi. And of course we'll be doing a bigger version of this festival on Sunday coming. Shri Ramachandra Bhagavan ki Jai, Shri Gaudiya Shashi ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai, Shri Guru ki Jai, Shri Bhagavatam ki Jai, Hari Bol, Jai.